Hi everyone, my name is Donkey and today we're back once again on the RTS project. So in the last video we were having some sort of weird problems with mining. It wasn't a huge issue, but it was something I kind of wanted to address just before we move on to making our proper buttons at the bottom for this sort of thing. And you can actually see here we've got some new artwork kind of for the enemy. Slightly bigger, but it kind of makes sense. This was actually sent to me by a guy called, I want to say Nicholas Ruggetti. I may have butchered that. But yeah, he sent it over, and I'll leave a link to his Instagram in the description if you want to go check him out. That would be pretty cool. I think he did the rest of the art as well, so the player, and he's done like a little castle as well. So he'll probably incorporate that somewhere later on in the line. You can probably see though, this guy has got flashing red eyes. That wasn't intentional, like that wasn't what he did when he added it. But the reason is because I've basically just added another frame and changed his eyes to be red in this frame. There's no real reason for that, but what I thought would be pretty cool is that when the barbarian, I think was what he named this, chased you, it'd be cool if his eyes switched to being red. Okay, it kind of makes sense, I think. So we're going to actually go ahead and change that around now. So you can do this however you want. The easiest way though is in the create event, just to set the image speed equal to 0, and that should address the problem of the flashing eyes. We'll just check that's working. Yep, now he just has normal eyes, and then when we come in range we want to just change it. So state chase, we want image index equal 1, and then passive state image index equal 0. It's pretty simple image switching sort of going on there. So we see he's pretty normal. We walk towards him, he's gone into chase mode. If we walk back out of his range, might be a bit tricky. I might want to like bring him down here first. You can slow that in for a second. There you go, he's gone back to normal mode. He's fine. Okay, so what we're actually going to be doing in this video is getting the things sorted, at least to a point, with the whole mining block thing. So you can see here, if we've got two guys, they kind of go up really irregularly, and it doesn't make much sense whatsoever. And it gets worse the more you add and the more you do. There's a little issue there as well, but we'll sort that out later on. So yeah, it goes up with really weird amounts. That wasn't actually that bad that time. Okay, I guess it was fine that time. But yeah, if we have them separate, it doesn't work very well at all. It takes ages and it does really weird increments. Not ideal, okay? And the reason is because if we actually look at the code that it uses to do this in the step event, scroll down to the bottom, the whole thing is basically littered with this whole divide by the instance number. Divide by the instance number, divide by the instance number. It kind of is a theme all the way through. And that of course isn't going to work anymore. Because we've got the unit separation, our units no longer work as like a pack. So it will work if all our units are clumped together, but as soon as we add another unit, it's just no longer going to work because this is counting every instance in the whole room. So I mocked up a little bit of code beforehand to give this a go. So I'm going to like rewrite it and talk you guys through what it is. It kind of worked to a point. I'll tell you why it didn't work great, but for the purpose it works fine. It'll just need some changes later on. I just did it quickly. Okay, so the first thing we're going to want to do is make a variable. And this is going to keep track of how many units we have at one square. And this is where realistically I was thinking we could have made this a lot better from the start by having our controller control lots of units, and our units not really do much by themselves. But because they already do a lot by themselves, I think it's just going to be easier to go from there. You could do it the other way, but we're just going to stick to this. So self.units initially is just going to be 1. So this is the amount of units that we have on one square, and that's why it's self. If it was for the whole thing, it wouldn't work because potentially we could have 2 units here and 1 unit there. If it was global, like without the self bit, it would just be 2 everywhere, which obviously is not true. So then here, what we need to do in the step event is make it so that that number goes up if we have them on the same spot. And this is where I ran into quite a few complications, because realistically there's no clever way that I could think of doing this without just checking every single step. So that's what we're going to do, basically. So self.units, we're going to start off as being 0, and then we're going to do our cheeky little for loop, which starts at I equals 0 and goes all the way up until we've hit the instance number of object basic unit I++. So we've done this loop many times. It loops through all of our units, and then just as before, we're going to set our ID equal to the instance find of object basic unit I, and that just again finds our first, second, third, etc., going through this loop of our units. Basically each ID identifies a different unit. Then what we're going to say is if self.x, which is specifically this instances, equals our instance that we're checking is x coordinate, and same for the y. So basically, does this instance equal the same as the instance we're checking? Are they on the same spot, basically? And if they are, we're just going to bump this count up, ++. Okay, pretty simple. Not too much going on there. And just so that we can see that a little bit nicer, here where we just been doing 1 before, we can now change that to self.units. So if we run this, we should see that it works. It works very nicely if we're just on the spot, I'd like to point out. And this is where I think it will work, but it won't work great. And you can see when we move, it doesn't work great. I think that the reason because of that is because when we move, I think it works when we move directly down. Yeah, it works when we move down. But when we move up and right and stuff, we move at slightly different angles and slightly like offset from each other. So they're not at exactly the same x coordinates. So, I mean, I guess we could maybe change that later on. But for the moment, if we're stationary, it works. And that's pretty important because we only want it for when we're on a mining block, right? Like here. So what we can do now is if we come back here, instead of dividing it by the instance number, we can just change all of these to be self.units. Okay, so take this, self.units, self.units, here, self.units, you get the gist. Basically now, instead of just having a generic count for the whole room, we've got a count per unit, basically. So if we now add 2, and we bring them over here, should still work, should still add 10, go up to 30, great. Got another unit though, should still add, or do that, should still add 10. Okay, yeah. So the reason why that's not exactly working is because our code is actually working as it should now, not as it was. So now what's happening, and you can see here, these are, it's getting 10, but at double the speed that it takes this to get 10, right? And it's also making a really long bar. But this is getting it a lot quicker than this is. You can just see there. If I move this one first and then this one will still finish first, I reckon. Yeah. So that's what it's meant to be doing. That's meant to be taking double as quick because there's 2 units, and that is now doing it twice as quick as this. So that's kind of working with that. What we're going to do just quickly is, well, we need to sort that next episode. But just quickly, I was going to just try something here. So instead of having them be exactly the same, let's try and use our script. We've got a script called isBetween, which checks whether one thing is between another. So let's try, and instead of doing this here, I've forgotten what it is actually. Let's check that. Script is between x, a, and b. So let's pass in our ID x, and is it between our self.x minus 5 and our self.x plus 5, and then let's copy this and do exactly the same for the y, and then swap all these x's for y's. So what this should do is, instead of making it so that it's got to be directly on top of each other, it's got a 5 limit either side, and that won't affect it because they'll never be like that close in reality. So let's see. I think that might have done it actually. But you can see here, if we've got these, like, they're not going to interfere with each other because they're never going to be that close. They're never going to, unless we pass through. If we pass through, it kind of glitches a little bit. But that's not massively, not a massive problem. You can see there it is actually working a lot nicer now. Oops. So I guess we'll leave it as that. Now at least our unit selection is working properly, our movement is working properly, and our count of units is also working properly. We just need to sort these bars out. I think it should be a pretty easy fix. So yeah, we'll fix that in the next episode, and then we'll finally go on and make our buttons at the bottom to finish off our unit selection. So that's going to be it for this video. If you liked this video, remember to like, subscribe, or do as want to do, and I'll talk to you in the next one.